Morning, everybody. It is Thursday, October 16th. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education's Curriculum Committee. We are going to talk about DHS new course proposals, and we're glad to have Ellen and some of the department chairs here, and we'll have an introduction to SIOP, which I'm very interested in because I don't know a lot about that. I will turn it over to Eric or Amy or whoever wants to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Dunn, for being here today, and Kristen Colonies, our department chair for 612 English, and Dennis Cabrera, our department chair for 612 Social Studies. There are a couple of courses that you'll hear about today and that you read about in your packets. Some of the courses have to do with leveling changes, as we've discussed in other departments, other subject areas. And we have an exciting course in the elective area for English. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Dunn, who may want to talk about the process of how these courses came to be, and I'm sure she'll want us to hear directly from both Kristen and Dennis.
Good morning.
Push the button. Not on. Yeah.
I know.
There you go.
Now it's okay. Good morning. We are delighted to be back with new courses as we do each year. 3 of the courses have really already been in the pipeline and been discussed with all of the central office staff and also with all of you at different points. So some of the changes are things that I think you're expecting to see as part of the process. As you know, we have a curriculum council that is a group of teachers representing each department. Department leaders are a part of that process, and new courses emerge from within the department. There are long discussions about those courses, and the Curriculum Council serves as a teacher leader role, really looking at new courses and how they may impact other courses within the building and how it fits with the big picture. That group is represented by Matt Bukta, who comes to our departmental council, which is made up of the department leaders. And again, those courses are discussed with that group before making it to a continued discussion with Amy and Eric. So it's a robust process. It helps to also set for the future. So some courses that may not get to this phase are still in the pipeline, have gone back to departments, and there's a discussion again about some possible tweaks or expectations or timing for the delivery of some courses, because we don't want to have so many electives that then we dilute what we are offering and the important things we think are there. So I am acting World Language Department Chair today, which I hope you will not quiz me on any of my world language. That was not my great strength in my program of studies, but we have 2 world language courses that I think you would expect to see. The French 2 Accelerated is being altered slightly, and the expectations and rigor of that course will be worked on with your approval over the summer to rewrite that curriculum and align it with the honors program that we have in all other departments now. So the French 2 Accelerated is the last of the accelerated courses that were once identified as 300 courses, and we've over the last few years looked at that, and each department has decided that a true honors offering for mostly 9th graders, sometimes 10th graders in this case, is more appropriate and more aligned to the work that we expect of students and the reward that we hope they earn by the GPA adjustment in that course. So that course, the population for that course exists currently, and the honors designation would go with your approval upon the decision to move in that direction and alter the curriculum appropriately for that. The ASL 4 is the natural progression of ASL. We are now offering ASL 3 at the high school, and American Sign Language 4 would complete the cycle and kind of the commitment we've made to those students who want to have a 4-year program. And it's exciting to be able to make 4 levels of American Sign Language. I think it raises the seriousness with which students may approach ASL, because they will then see, I do have a 4-year option. And so we really believe that adding this will strengthen the program that has already begun. And it is I think, a wonderful opportunity for students. And there are students who come in and out of that, take a year maybe as an extra elective as well. And so it's a wonderful learning process for those students. There is also the introduction of a biliteracy seal for ASL now. And so those students would be able to sit for that. And more of our colleges are treating this as a world language. And I think it's a really wonderful opportunity for our high school and for our students. So we're enthusiastically recommending that we kind of close that loop and make this a 4-year language at DHS. So I might stop there if you have questions, unless you'd like to hear from everyone and then come back up to you.
I think we can wait for, yeah, we
Till
want
the
to do
end?
the language. Yeah.
I just have one question, and this is just along the lines of consistency between all languages. So Mandarin right now, and I can't remember if the current 8th graders in Mandarin would be the first.
The current 9th graders are the first students that have gone all the way through Mandarin at the middle school, if that's what
So,
you're
and
asking.
they are in Mandarin 2, or did we all?
They are mostly in Mandarin too, yes,
And do we have
or Mandarin 2 honors.
We do have a Mandarin 2 honors
Yeah.
offering now for freshmen. Okay.
So
That's what I
that
was
will be, we will, one of the courses in the pipeline is the AP Mandarin.
Right.
Or a Mandarin 5, or a combination of those, because those students will soon land without a Mandarin level at senior
Okay.
year. So
Thank you.
that's one of the ones that's in waiting.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
In terms of the French 2 honors, how much work does the accelerated versus the honors, how much work do you think that will be over the summer?
Work over the summer, yeah, it's probably a 25-hour,
Okay.
revamp. If it's less, we put in 25 hours for the curriculum
Right.
writing. If it's less than that, we won't need it, but
Okay.
that's what we put in for the
Okay.
budget, yes.
Other questions about language? Okay.
All right, so I think we'll go next maybe to Western Civ. Okay. Because that's also the next one in the kind of expected sequence, which closes out the honors expectations for our 9th graders. I would say that this is something that has been long discussed in social studies, and I'm sure Dennis will reflect on that. And I think it's really important to say, with these final changes, we have to do a very good job of educating our incoming 9th grade families to make selections in the honors program by level of interest, by true passion for a subject, because we really want to be careful about 9th graders taking honors everything. And so that's something that we will spend some considerable time. It's something we're always messaging at all grade levels, but I think especially in this transition, it's a big change to high school. There's a lot of things changing. And so we want to make sure that we have the offerings in the subject that students love, and that's the thinking. However, we really do, I just didn't want to let this morning go without saying that's a really important piece of
I
this
appreciate
change.
it.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Cabrera.
So thank you, Mrs. Dunn,
You're
and good morning. Thank you for having us here. I would say that, yeah, it was a long discussion. It was, I don't think an easy decision to move forward with it, but ultimately it was about how we best meet the needs of students and what we see students pushing for and wanting. So that argument sort of wins the day every time. So we decided to put the course forward, Honors Western Civ. We were also very mindful of not changing our Western Civ course because we recognize that it prepares students well in history as a foundational course. So there's a lot of resistance in the department against watering down the 300 Western Civ. So the intention here is to better meet the needs of students and not to change the course that currently exists. And that said, I would echo what Ellen just said about we have to be mindful about having balance in students' schedules and really emphasizing to families that this should be based on the students' drive and what they're interested in. If you're son or daughter is interested in math and science, that's great. I encourage that interest even as a history teacher. But if they are focused on the humanities, then this might be a course that they want to consider.
A couple questions about the honors Western Civ. So we've all lived that course multiple times in our own household, and it's not an easy course. So can you talk a little bit more about why there's can't remember the word you use, like hesitation to quote unquote water it down? Like what's the differential between the current 300 level course and what you expect for the 400 level course? And how many children do you think will actually be interested in taking this?
So I would say that one of the reasons that Western Civ is difficult, just the 300 Western Civ, is because if you think about one of the points of emphasis for history teachers is primary source documents. And if we're reading primary source documents from the Roman Empire or ancient Greece, or even 16th century, those are going to be dense and difficult texts. And so we do scaffold and we do maybe change the language a bit and note that to students that this has been simplified. But there are students who can handle that and can handle it well. So the idea is it puts us in a better position to differentiate for those students who are advanced to be able to offer the course. So it's always going to be a tough lift for ninth graders to do a history course that asks them to read difficult texts. And we want to be able to push those students who really want the challenge. So that's the sort of the tension there is it's always going to be hard. And there are kids who can meet that challenge and want to be pushed further.
How many sections do you think will be in the honors?
I couldn't give you a good, I can only go by what we see in terms of the other humanities course, which is the English, I believe was 80 or so. I don't know if you happen to know.
My head.
I roughly, that's what I think it was when I looked.
So a fair amount.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you all for being here. So just a quick question about how we think about these classes and how we think about the changes. I'm really glad that we're always thinking about how to best serve our students and how to differentiate and offer these courses so that everyone is, being challenged and reaching their potential. I am curious if there might be a way, and not today, this is just to think about a way to help the board contextualize a little bit what the picture is of all of our students at DHS. So for example, I think it could be helpful to have some sort of snapshot in terms of, this has been our enrollment in Western Civ and here are the grades received, right? And I think that could help tease out, especially for some of these courses that we've talked about that, have the big reputation across town in terms of how many kids really are needing that honors class, right? And how many kids are struggling with the 300? I think a little bit of context could help us just see, that kind of numerical snapshot. So just a question for potential future conversations about how we think about shifting and evolving our courses.
Go ahead.
I do have a question. So I understand the primary documents is one difference. For the honors course, is the intent that the writing assignments or the grading or the assessments are going to be more challenging? And how is that going to be kind of weighed? Because it will be challenging, especially for students that love humanities and they want to take honors English and honors Western Civ, and they might already be in accelerated math. So I understand your point. This freshman year is challenging as it is, even without having an honors offering. So how are you anticipating that kind of would be handled?
So I think with this course, we can't change the breadth, but what we can do is adjust the depth. And that's where I see the primary difference. And in terms of assessment, the students will be writing. These students would be on track for AP courses going forward. So this gives an opportunity to better prepare them for that kind of thing. So DBQ is document-based questioning. It's a very common form of assessment on the AP, and I think actually a very good indication of students' ability to read complex texts and make sense of them. So I would imagine that we'll see a bit more of that in the honors section. And that's, again, not to say that it's not happening at the Western Civ 300. And another thing that we were mindful of is we always want to create opportunities for students to move up. So simply because a student opts to take 300 Western Civ doesn't close the door for them to take 400 or honors world studies in their sophomore year and potentially take those AP courses down the line. I would never want to punish a kid who's trying to be responsible and balance their schedule. So, you know, it's very common for a ninth grader to say, I thought that math was my thing, but actually I think history is my thing. I encourage that. That's great. And, you know, they're
When it goes that way.
yeah. And if it goes the other way, that's fine too. But, you know, they're figuring out who they are. That's part of high school. It's just, you know, getting a chance to try different things and experiment with, you know, all of the different courses that we have available, and then ultimately making a better informed decision about what direction they want to take their academic life in.
And just one follow-up question with the vision of the graduate kinds of ways that we're implementing this in the curriculum. Is it your intention that the honors class might have more of those kinds of projects, or the oral projects, or the, you know, kinds of things? Or is that going to be offered still in both regular 300 and 400 level Western Civ?
Absolutely both. And, you know, again, my bias as a history teacher, building empathy, right? This is a core skill, I think, of a historian, is to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who was alive 300 years ago, let's say. That's not an easy thing to do. We are in our own time, in our own worlds. So yeah, it's something that those are skills, communication, you know, all of those things are skills that we want to encourage in all of our students. So yeah, across the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Kristen, you're up.
Okay, English. I will say, you know, it's been a long history of the English department. We really examine the literature courses at the senior level and make sure that they are responsive to interest and content that has hooks for our students to keep them engaged in literature in this final year before they leave us. Oh, I did it again. This button is backwards from what you would think it is. So, I think it's, we have a new course, and as you know, they also are very thoughtful about removing one when they bring one forward. And so, there's a new proposal from the English department for an elective, which is very exciting.
I apologize for not bringing my squirting flower and my clown car this morning. So the English class that's being proposed is called Punchlines and Perspectives, thinking about humor writing, satire, and the art of commentary. This is a 300 level course for our seniors to take as an elective option, adding to our collection of electives, the titles of which are at the bottom of this slide here. We were challenged to find an equally appealing title to match its counterparts there. But this is an opportunity for students to look at the genre of humor and satire as a way of expressing their thinking about the world around them, the world that they live in, and their feelings about life, essentially. We wanted to make sure that our students who were not pursuing the AP track in their senior year had options to choose from and counterpart with their capstone experience. And out of the students that we surveyed, this one was widely appealing to students, and they seemed excited about it. I always, in my experience of getting to know the department last year, I found it really interesting to see how they moved into a recruiting kind of stance of getting kids, like, how are we going to recruit kids to take our electives? And teachers are going into each other's classes and, you know, talking them up. And particularly a new one we have this year that's running that hasn't run before is Dangerous Creatures, and talking about women in fiction. And Jennifer Swen did a great job of promoting that in all the classes she went to. So it's interesting to see. And this was a course that the staff was excited about teaching and the students seemed excited about as well. So if we can get kids excited about English in their senior year and give them options, we think this is a great opportunity for them.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out in the memo that this course will replace another course that was not offered because of low enrollment. So I appreciate you going through the course catalog and looking to see what is not being, what, you know, you can't always add, we have to take some things away. So I appreciate that. I don't know that I have a ton of questions on it. Katie?
Thank you. When I saw this in the packet, I got really excited about this. This sounds so fun. And I just wanted to say that, I really appreciate the way that you are thinking about student interest to keep them engaged, but also the skills beyond, you know, Dennis, when you were talking about building empathy through, you know, the study of other cultures, I see that you have a bullet here about developing analytical and creative writing skills, but I actually think that this course could develop like so many things, you know, from, the use of humor as a way to diffuse situations, right? Like that's something that I see posted on job descriptions all the time, right? Just about people skills. And then the flip side of that is also about helping students to understand the appropriate use of humor, you know, what is actually funny and doesn't cross a line. And I think that those are just skills that go beyond English, beyond academics, but really into that character building and that interpersonal relations and how we relate, you know, to society in general. So I'm super, super excited about this, and I can't wait to hear how it comes out. And I hope you guys will share some of the writing with us.
Absolutely.
And even if you guys wind up being subjects of them.
I was gonna say.
I think this is a great class, and I think one of my students would have loved to have taken this, who's now in college. The question I have is because in many ways, this almost, in some ways, seems like a creative writing potentially class for, you know, students who can learn how to write in a humorous way or satire. So, but I think that there are many students who would really love to do this just because they love the humor and the comedy and that kind of writing. So how are you anticipating balancing and not scaring away students who might not consider themselves to be creative writing people, but would love to take a class like this?
I think the course is designed to both address the creative writing aspect, but also thinking about as they're reading examples of authors who have used humor and satire as a genre, critiquing their work and looking at those author craft moves and understanding how the author made decisions to reflect on the world around them and taking a stance on whether or not it was effective or not. So there are lots of different analytical angles that they can come at with this particular course as well.
And just to follow up, in some ways, this could end up almost getting into like a political kind of a class
We're very
that
cautious
you
of that.
see in
Mhm.
colleges. And I would just want to make sure that, you know, because for instance, all the SNL skits that get into political kinds of discussions with comedy. So if we can present both sides of the situation or authors who are, you know, on one side or another and see how that ends up, you know, influencing people, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. There's a note there about text selection, making sure that we're creating, you know, including a wide range of perspectives, but also making sure that the course is not introducing a particular side at all, but really looking at it from an author's stance of how do writers and how do thinkers take this genre as a mode of expressing their ideas.
Great.
Thank you. All right, are we all in favor of moving forward with these classes, with these courses? All right, perfect. We will see you on the 28th. All right, thank you all. Moving on to our second topic of PSYOP.
Right.
You guys don't have to stay.
It's funny, you certainly don't have to say, but I was in a professional learning session that both Kristen and Dennis were facilitating earlier this week. Seems so long ago now, but earlier this week, and they were talking about vocabulary and tier 2 vocabulary and engaging the middle school staff across the 2 departments about vocabulary instruction and instructional strategies. And I said to them, this is amazing because we're going to be talking with the board at the next curriculum committee meeting about vocabulary instruction. So it was a wonderful connection to the work. So just wanted to start today and have us think about meeting the needs of all of our learners and thinking about the core values of the district, thinking about that idea of excellence for all learners, and thinking about how we leverage instructional strategies and frameworks that we have within our system to make sure we're meeting the needs of the diverse learners we have in our setting. So we're talking about these vocabulary strategies today and SIOP, and I'll get into what that is in just a couple of minutes. I want you to be thinking about how this instructional strategy and this approach helps students, whether they are in ELP classes, kindergarten classes, first grade learning command of the English language in a different way than their natural acquisition of language at home when they're babies. Be thinking about our students who receive ML services, and be thinking about our students who are studying a second or third language, like we were starting to talk about Mandarin before, or ASL4. These are strategies and these are frameworks that we think about when we want to meet the needs of all of our kiddos. So we thought today that we would engage the board in an interactive activity. We recently, and I've been writing to you about this in the weekly updates through Dr. Burns' communication with you. We have recently cooperated with the CES, which is the Cooperation for Educational Services. It's what part of our RESC that we belong to. And we have set up 2 sessions with them, one that we just had in October and one that will be a follow-up in February. This gives our staff an opportunity to learn what SIOP is, which is called Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. It's really meant to think about how do we ensure that we have strategies that help all kids access vocabulary and really rich vocabulary. And we'll talk about through this example, what is the difference between tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary. So this is actually an activity that we engaged with, Patricia and I and our staff. We had probably 25 elementary staff engaging in this in one session, and then 25 in the secondary session later on in the day. So I'd like you to just take a few minutes, and if you have this printed, you can do it on your printed copy, or you can just kind of in your head, think about how you might fill in these blanks. And Sarah was mentioning to me the other night, this feels like the old Mad Libs from those of us who remember that in the 80s. So give yourself a read through and think about what might be some of the vocabulary words that you might put where those blank spaces are. Give me a minute to do that. How are we doing? Do you think some spaces are really easy to, like, you're pretty confident that you have some of them figured out?
Yes.
All right, let's try to start. The questions that, what would we put there? That people face,
I did parents,
parents,
Parents.
okay? As they raise
children,
children, okay? Children from infancy to adult life are not easy to, anticipate, answer. Okay, both
Fathers.
fathers,
and
mothers.
can become concerned when health problems such as,
I said colds, but I don't think that's right.
this is where I fell apart the other day. I also said colds, colic.
Okay.
Colic might be a tier 2 word.
Close.
Yes. Arise anytime after the
I said embryo. That's not right.
embryo. All right. Embryo is not a tier 1 word. Embryo, okay, embryo or early stage, early might be a tier 1. Experts recommend that young children, we're pretty confident about that, should have plenty of sleep, not salad, plenty of nutritious food for healthy growth.
Boys and girls.
Boys and girls naturally should not share.
Same bed.
Anyone come up with anything else there? All right, we're stumped. We're stumped. Or even sleep in the same
Room.
okay? They may be afraid of the
Dark.
Okay, we're all confident. And some of our answers we're pretty confident with. All right, I'm going to give you a clue here. This is not about children.
Oh.
It's not about human parenthood. What are we thinking?
The questions that people face as they raise chickens from incubation.
Okay, that is definitely not a tier 1 word. Incubation to adult life.
Analyze.
Analyze. Okay.
Farmers and
Oh,
yeah.
Markets, did you say?
manufacturers.
Oh, manufacturers, okay.
Such as
Oh.
Yeah.
Contamination.
contamination.
Contamination, all right, that could be.
Egg.
Egg stage. That would make sense with the picture. Experts recommend that young
Children.
chickens
Chickens.
should have
Chicken.
plenty of
Space.
sunshine, space, and nutritious food for healthy growth. B and G. I'm pretty confident something like should not share the same barn. I don't know. Or even sleep in the same. They may be afraid of the
Dogs.
dogs. All right. How did we do? The questions that poultrymen face as they raise chickens from incubation, Katie got that one, to adult life are not easy to answer. Both farmers and merchants, Shirley was onto that a bit, can become concerned when health problems such as coccidiosis arise anytime after the egg stage to later life. Experts recommend that young chicks should have plenty of sunshine, Dennis, and nutritious food for healthy growth. Banties and geese should not share the barnyard or even sleep in the same roost. They may be afraid of the dark. So, guessing at words is not always the best strategy, right? And so we've talked a lot about this. I know Katie and I have talked a lot about this. So let's be thinking about, right? How do we give all children access to language and to vocabulary and instructional strategies that help them grow as readers and writers using not only tier 1 vocabulary like sunshine, but vocabulary that they need to be really successful and to have, expertise in areas where they find interest. So how did you feel during this activity, like the first time around?
Like Mad Libs.
Like
Pretty-
Mad
but
Libs?
pretty confident.
But pretty confident,
Yep.
right? And confidence can give us the bias that we have it, right? Whether we're the student who's confident I have it or the teacher who thinks that the student has it. And how important it is to really dig deep. And when you found out what this was really about and you saw some of this other vocabulary, thinking about we might have gotten, like Katie got incubation. I don't think I ever would have come up with coccidiosis.
I don't even think I knew that word until now.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, what's a banty? That's a word.
It's a species of a type of one of these chicks or birds. Yeah, I didn't know. Exactly. So what we wanted to talk about are when we think about language development and how critical that is with our young people in school. Again, our littles in ELP, all the way up through our kiddos that are taking AP Lit, AP Comp. We're thinking about conversational fluency, right? Even thinking about how children are putting in order their words as they're putting sentences together and they're having more complex sentences in the younger grades in speech and in writing. Thinking,
Point one thing out.
sure.
So in the second example, you had a visual prompt. Yeah, you didn't have in the first. So just want to show about reasonable accommodations and looking at that. You only had prior knowledge and you went with what your first knowledge was with the first stimulus, but on the second one, you had a visual prompt that really let you know what context it was.
Right, and
So
we're gonna get into that with another
Just wanna
example.
point that out.
The
reasonable
language teacher in
accommodation.
me loves that. So the discrete language skills, thinking about the function of language and how language works, right? There's definitely a pattern, and English is a very complex language to learn. And then academic language proficiency, exactly some of the things we're talking about. And when I went the other day to MMS, and Dennis and Kristen were both working with the departments together, social studies and English, there was really a heavy focus on tier 2 vocabulary. And what are those vocabulary words that across subject areas, across disciplines, if the child doesn't know specifically what it means to, for example, analyze a text, then they can't demonstrate what they know about the subject matter. So really helping to make that more concrete for our students. So what is SIOP? So SIOP again is that Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. There are 8 components of this framework and 30 features. The first half of our session that took place just October 7th, we were working with staff on specific instructional strategies to support their lesson preparation, thinking about alignment to the standards. The standard is the same for any child, regardless of where they are in their continuum of learning, which is why, as Shirley mentioned, we have to think about how to use cues, differentiate resources to help all children meet with success. Building of the background knowledge, when we entered that exercise first with all of those blank spaces, we only knew what we knew. Coccidius was not in there for me. That was not part of my background knowledge. Comprehensible input is a strategy that was really developed by a linguist and was really first taken hold in world language classrooms. And it's the idea of when you are working with young people or young adults, anyone really, and you want to make another language that's not their native language more accessible to them, you think about how to make the language comprehensible. In other words, with our young children, right, they think birth to 5, they have a pretty significant command of the English language if, they're here with us in Darien Public Schools and that's their home language by the time they come to school. Not as much, perhaps, for our students who are studying Mandarin. So how does the Mandarin teacher make that language comprehensible? And it's not, as you can imagine, by saying, I can, you can, he can, she can, we can, they can. It's different when you say, I do, you do, he does. That gets tricky, right? You have to think about ways to make language and language function more comprehensible. So we talked about strategies for that. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about practice and application so that the staff who attended that session will have an opportunity to come to practice what they've learned. They've committed to a couple of strategies. We'll come back and talk about it in February. And the next session in February, those pieces that aren't highlighted, especially the review and assessment, how you use SIOP strategies to support assessment, will be our focus for that next session. So what we also talked about is like, what does it mean to really know a word? And I think, Sarah, your point about, we were pretty confident about some of the words that we thought we had there. And the surface understanding of a word is really only a very small part of understanding that word. So what we're trying to do is think about morphology and word meaning and all of those other studies, of aspects of vocabulary and vocabulary development that will strengthen and enrich our children's experience with language. So we think about synonyms and antonyms, categorical information. Gosh, a lot of our words, especially in the English language, have multiple meanings. Again, morphological knowledge, conceptual knowledge, formal versus informal, nuanced meanings. Think about idioms and how challenging those are to learn. Phonological knowledge, which we know is a critical focus of working especially with our littles and wanting to make sure that that phonological knowledge is really strong by the time our children leave 2nd grade. Orthographic knowledge, in the spelling piece. Discipline-specific vocabulary, I'll go back to coccidiosis. Inappropriate syntax, how we use language structurally. Just wanted to talk about, again, our shift to our new resource for literacy instruction, K3 into reading. This resource uses a lot of instructional strategies embedded within the text to support vocabulary development. And here on this page are just a couple of screenshots of different things that would point that out to you. So there are vocabulary cards. We think about text features. We think about concept maps and word webs. So really the focus is thinking deeply about vocabulary, word structure, word development, vocabulary, and how that helps to grow really strong readers. The same thing with math. Some of our staff asked questions with SIOP, it seems so language-based. Should the math interventionists attend? Should math teachers attend? We know that so much of math is connected to reading and children being really strong readers. Children can never problem solve if there's a vocabulary word in a problem, whether it's the function of how to solve or even a descriptor like the Bantes that can completely throw a child off. So we did have the math folks attend as well. And we just wanted to show with the math resource, again, there are other instructional strategies and approaches that help our children access vocabulary. I mentioned before, which words, the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary and what we should focus on in our instruction. The answer really is all 3. I would say tier 2 vocabulary is definitely a through line when we think about how we ask kids to apply what they know. If we don't have kids have a solid handle on tier 2 vocabulary, we won't be able to get them to tier 3, if that makes sense, right? So we spend a lot of time, it should seem like, you know, it's obvious to tell a child you need to analyze, but that is not necessarily an inherent understanding for a child to have. What does that mean? So we're working on that all the way up through in a very articulated way, especially thinking about the transition from 5th to 6th as, you know, as literacy becomes much more complex. Okay, and I'm going to stop this. Can you stop her? All right, we're going to engage in our second activity now. And this is a brief activity. And Patricia Thalassinos, who is sitting to my right, she is our coordinator for MLL services for Darien Public Schools. So she supports our MLL programming from kindergarten all the way up through grade 12 plus. And she's going to help lead us in this second activity. And I think this will make really clear what the strategy of comprehensible input is. And I want to thank Patricia because she really was very vocal about bringing SIOP training to the district. You can imagine that our colleagues at the secondary level, where tier 3 vocabulary becomes especially critically important in the different disciplines, wanting support for vocabulary instruction. Again, whether they're working with students who receive ML services or, you know, one of our typical students who has studied the English language for a long time and it's their native language, that tier 3 vocabulary is really tricky, and thinking about strategies to support that. Do you want to introduce this activity?
Sure. So this activity is to emphasize the importance of comprehensible input. We will transport you to a lesson right now, and then we'll come back to do an activity so you can demonstrate your understanding and your learning.
Right.
Do you want me to hit it?
和健康。首先，我们来看一下猴子和熊猫的饮食。猴子。
It's the first, yeah, that's the first.
你们好。
Sorry.
你们好，今天我们来学习食品和健康。首先，我们来看一下猴子和熊猫的饮食。猴子很瘦，猴子很健康。猴子吃健康食品。猴子吃苹果。猴子吃胡萝卜。猴子吃米饭。猴子喝果汁。猴子很健康。熊猫吃不健康食品。熊猫吃炸鸡腿。熊猫吃薯条。熊猫吃巧克力。熊猫喝可乐。熊猫不健康。谁的食品更健康？猴子还是熊猫？接下来我们要把食品分类，分成健康食品和不健康食品。薯条，薯条是不健康食品，我们把它放在这里。苹果，苹果是健康食品，我们把它放在这里。好，接下来请大家把食品分类，谢谢。
Pause. We're going to, it's your turn. I'll pass these out down there. And we're going to work in partners, right, Patricia?
Yes,
Work in partnerships.
Doug says he has it, so that's good.
Dennis thinks he has it, all right. He's a ringer. No, I think we're good.
So take a look at your sort and see if you can successfully complete the task. You notice in the video, she did repeat herself several times, because we always think that that's a great strategy to comprehend. How is this making you feel? Any guesses what the task is?
Do we all have the same things?
That's a great question. So you do have the same sort, but if you notice, some of you have, as Shirley was pointing out before, providing scaffolds to help access. Some of you have more of that than others. And that's just something for the teacher to decide who needs more of a scaffold, or based on the activity, they can kind of tell, oh, we have to swoop in and provide a little bit more support.
I'm gonna go with health results first.
Also working with a partner often helps. Okay, so we're going to now go revisit the lesson. Take a look at the instructional strategies that the teacher is using to help the comprehensive. And then check your own line. Here's my next.
品和健康。首先，我们来看一下猴子和熊猫的语词。猴子，猴子，猴子吃健康食品，猴子很健康，猴子每天跑步，猴子可以举重，猴子很开心的读书，因为猴子吃健康食品。苹果，苹果，吃，吃，猴子吃苹果，猴子吃苹果。胡萝卜，胡萝卜，吃，猴子吃胡萝卜，猴子吃胡萝卜。米饭，米饭，猴子吃米饭，猴子吃米饭。果汁，果汁，喝，喝，猴子喝果汁，猴子喝果汁。猴子吃健康食品，猴子很健康，猴子每天很有劲，猴子每天很开心。熊猫吃不健康食品，熊猫每天都很累，每天都想睡觉。熊猫吃不健康食品，炸鸡腿，炸鸡腿。熊猫吃炸鸡腿，熊猫吃炸鸡腿。薯条，薯条，吃，吃。熊猫吃薯条，熊猫吃薯条。
So it's riveting, I'm sure that all was. We want to check back in to see how you're feeling now about your sport.
We sort of. So the first, once again, visuals, the first one did not have any visual or any kind of concept of what they were doing. So we actually had the right answers, just the wrong animal. Okay, so we sorted, we thought the panda was the healthy eating one. So we sorted all of our carrots, apple, and orange juice and rice to the panda. We gave the monkey all the not so healthy stuff like fried chicken.
Wait, so
that-
you had pictures
So
of the
Shirley,
panda
you
and
had
the-
pictures.
Sorry?
You had pictures of the animals at the top?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, we had no pictures.
We had no
Oh,
pictures.
no. Rest my case.
And we had pictures of food, but not the animals.
Okay, so yeah, ours had, yeah, so.
We got nothing.
Okay, so we had the best visuals of cinema. How about over there?
They had no photos.
No photos.
Same.
So we were the lucky ones. We were the lucky ones.
And so you're saying that the pictures really helped you be successful
Yes,
in understanding the task
absolutely.
and understanding what her message was? Because the first time we had no context, we had no idea what she was saying. She did repeat things lots of times, which we do as educators. But when there was no context and no other clues, it really wasn't helping. And so besides the pictures and the images, she was using gestures, she was pointing, she had facial expressions, she went like this. So all of those pieces together, they're all really strong instructional strategies that we use, especially, you know, as an elementary teacher, we use them all the time to make the abstract concrete. And that's part of the thinking and the philosophy behind SciUp, making it more hands-on and concrete to help students access the content.
So without these instructional strategies, we need to be thinking about, again, the student's current level of language proficiency. With comprehensible input, we can make sure that the vocabulary is not too challenging. It's like kind of that Goldilocks, that just right spot for students. And, another thing that I think is so important to recognize is that no matter what the role of the person was in the professional learning session the other day, they could access this. When we think about children's language development, children develop their receptive language skills first, as we know, right? Think about your own children at home. And so there are other strategies that we would make sure that we're having so that children are also practicing the vocabulary in an expressive way. That would be through their speech and their writing as well. So I wanted to just bring this to kind of our local work and thinking about some of our strategic work in district with MTSS. And some of our conversations last spring were help us understand how all of these things connect, right? How does MTSS connect to everything else we're doing? How does the professional learning connect? How do the different interventions that we provide and strategies, how do all of these pieces of our work in teaching and learning connect? This professional learning session with SciUp is something that for part of our MTSS work, when we think about MTSS at multi-tiered systems of support, that's really about meeting the needs of the whole child. And it's really about every child in the district. So I just wanted to show this as an example. When we think about our students who are receiving ML services, this was the 2024-2025 performance index for ELA collectively across the whole system, across all tested grades. For non-English learners, typical population, almost 83%, 68% for our students who are identified to receive ML services. As a reminder, there are really high expectations. When children are newcomers, they are pretty quickly expected to take the SBA in English.
Immediately.
Right, like
There is no more opt-out.
If
That's
they-
under, every student.
so if they come in June, in May, toward the end of submission, they're not. But if they come in April, they are. Could be the day that they come to school is the first day they sit for the assessment. We're trying to think about MTSS and meeting the needs of learners who need that type of instruction, as well as our kiddos that are receiving instruction in a second and third language and ultimately toward earning a seal of biliteracy. So we think about building an MTSS framework, providing instruction and professional learning that supports all instruction across the continuum. So that's how that would connect that MTSS model to, for example, an instructional strategy or approach such as SciUp. That's how it connects to the bigger picture of our work, something that we're anchoring to preschool through grade 12 plus. And that was an exciting learning opportunity, I hope, for all of you. You may have questions about vocabulary, instruction. You certainly will hear more about our MTSS work in December. We've tried to kind of talk a little bit about it in each meeting leading up to that December share out. But at this point, we're happy to discuss or answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I just want to share that I'm excited that we're talking at the table about, the whole learning of the whole child, and that each child is different, and that differentiated instruction for each child is really what we're focusing on. So I appreciate that.
You are focusing a lot on vocabulary, but the question I have is for math or science, is part of the intent of this allowing teachers to have more instruction techniques to teach math or science, for instance, using visual cues or, in science, kind of the lab experiment, because I think it's great if we can also meet the needs of students who might be more visual learners. And this is let alone language or English as a first or second language. Students who are visual learners and learn much more that way as opposed to reading a text. And that's something that this is helping teachers with additional instruction strategies.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So we know that strong literacy skills are foundational to a student's success in mathematics. Something that I could compare this to with mathematics instruction would be what we call CRA, and that's concrete, representational, and abstract. So we want to make sure there are some students who can understand some mathematical concepts and they're ready for the abstract representation. There are other students that we would start with, we would differentiate and offer concrete, something like a manipulative. And then there's the representational, which is typically more pictorial. And so we want to make sure that the standard is the same for every child, right? That's the point of these standards. We want to make sure that there are pathways and toward access for all kids to develop and have those standards mastered. So the CRA is an example of a strategy that's part of what we do for our core instruction. That's not about intervention. We should be thinking about providing that kind of access in our core instruction for all children.
And then with play-based learning, for instance, a lot of like Montessori kind of schools will really use the manipulatives, especially at the earlier kind of ages, to help kids actually learn math using that before they can even read. So I mean, I would imagine is part of this whole philosophy and teaching strategy kind of along the lines of that? And are we also using that as part of our play-based learning curriculum development?
I'm so excited by that question because yes, and when you think about play-based learning and the curriculum being very student-driven, the students really are often thinking about, the teachers think, what are the students interested in wanting to learn about? So if it's, the fire station or weather or dinosaurs. It's pretty amazing when you think about tier 3 vocabulary. There are some 3-year-olds that can really tell you a lot about dinosaurs and use very complex terms to talk about the different species of dinosaurs. So exactly, we think about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary through play-based learning as well.
Thank you.
That's an awesome question. Thank you for that.
I have a lot of questions. So first, I just want to kind of ground the context of this. Did you shorten it to PSYOP? Is that what you called it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So PSYOP is not a regular instructional practice. It is more based in the MTSS tier for.
It's MTSS really begins, remember, with tier 1 with core instruction.
Sure. Okay, so this will show up in the classroom and also be used to help students that need some
It's an
extra support.
approach.
Right.
Yes, it's an
Okay.
approach that was developed to help access for multilingual learners, but the strong instructional practices can be used with all students. Like you said, some are more visual learners. And
Some are more sensory.
right,
learners.
and I think, for the purpose of this meeting, Amy pulled out like the vocabulary pieces, but if you looked at the, like that closed passage that had to do with building background knowledge and activating what they already knew about something and how it affects what they bring in. The comprehensible input video was about making it visual, bringing in, there might be videos, there might be graphic organizers, posters, realia. That was like the bananas and the yogurt and those types of things. So there's many different pieces that addresses the whole child.
If I may just add to that, to Katie's question, these strategies, methodologies happen in all classrooms. They already exist. I think the notion of emphasizing it with multilingual learners, of looking at strategies that work in our classrooms as daily practice, but also emphasizing, and the visual is a great example of that, that when you're acquiring a new language or acquiring, make sure you're using those practices and engaged in that learning. I think if you went down the list of all of them, down to manipulatives, down to different aspects in mathematical instruction and language learning, they already exist. I think it's just capturing and putting them together, to your
Yeah.
point.
Thank you, Shirley. I appreciate that.
And I'll just do,
yes, sorry.
I'll just to Robin's question also. For early based learning, also play-based learning. And you probably do remember when your children were growing up, that correspondence is done with how many M&Ms go in that circle to make 5. No one's doing the numerals. We're using real tangibles before that. I think they're just emphasizing, as this question did, although Ellen and I had a cheat sheet because we had the animals and the pictures, but of how to make sure that you're using all those multisensory pieces and that you're capturing ways that you can give meaning to language. And that would be the most reinforcing way to learn and acquire a new language.
Thank you. So yes, I absolutely noticed that you, in your presentation, I think it was on the iceberg slide that you were talking about the components of language and how the students learn. And, as soon as we started talking about this, I was thinking about morphology and syntax. And so I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And especially as it relates to multi-language learners. I'm curious about how deep we go into that, right? Like the idea of those kind of compound words with bases, right? Like classroom. And if we kind of are explicit in telling children, to look for those things and what they mean, because I think that, confidence is a big part of it. Like, because I can tell you that I was extremely frustrated with this. Like, I did not like the way that I was feeling when I was doing this project. And so I can see the benefits of kids getting confidence of looking from different ways. And syntax in particular is fascinating when you think about it from other languages. In English, it's very much about order, but that is not the case for other languages, and can be really, really confusing for people who come from places where the word order doesn't mean the same thing. I am curious. Well, my first thing is that I will tell you, having gone through the recent curriculum change and some of the deficiencies that we did in early literacy, this does bring back a little bit of nerves in terms of introducing pictures as children are learning to read. So I think it's important when we talk about this to be very clear about it as being a way for children to just even understand the spoken language and what we're talking about, and that we're not replacing reading with guessing and pictures, right? I just think with the history that we've gone through and the 2 years of detailed curriculum evaluation that we went through, I think it's just important to make sure that we're being explicit about how we're using this and why, and that it's not just a backside.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Katie, because that's why I intentionally said during that close activity, so guessing isn't a good strategy.
That was
Did you
music
catch
to my
that?
ears. I
So-
absolutely did.
So part of our shift to a new resource is absolutely focusing on morphology. And that was not necessarily an explicit part of our curriculum before. That's why I made that connection also to the HMH resource, not only for the literacy piece, but also for mathematics.
Yes.
But you
thank
will definitely see a focus on morphology. And as we come forward and obviously share update with the board regarding K-3 literacy resource, we will work to make that really explicit so that you can see evidence of that.
Great, thank you. And then my last question for you is, as we're thinking about these multiple resources that give children access to the lessons, I'm curious about background knowledge and content exposure for comprehension. Like, for example, I know that there is an ed tech that's very focused on that. It's called ReadWorks, and it's about the idea that like children have better comprehension when they're more familiar with concepts. So I'm curious about how we might be exposing children just to a broader variety so that then when we have lessons, it makes sense. And then additionally, the use of audiobooks. I know Shirley knows exactly where I'm going here, but especially when we have children who are either have language-based learning disabilities or children who are coming from, learning a new language, being able to hear a book at a higher level than they can read keeps them engaged, exposes them to higher level content, is not like trapping them and frustrating them and, like something that they feel is perhaps for children who are, in younger grades. So I am curious to hear about how we might be incorporating those aspects as well.
So the language teacher, that's music to my ears, because when you think about how young children learn through rhyming and their command of understanding, then eventually beyond rhyming, letter and sound connection. Think about in a world language classroom, there's so much more that children can learn when you give them those multiple modalities. It doesn't replace the need to continue to work on how children would read a text. We want to be focusing on developing those skills all along. But the comprehension piece is certainly strengthened with background knowledge. And I'll give another example with play-based learning. you know, you think about in many times in elementary schools, you know, you learn, complete a unit of study and then go on a field trip. Conversely, putting that experience on the front end increases relevancy and engagement and helps children to make meaning. So all of those strategies are happening and will continue to focus on through all levels. When we think about that MTSS frame, our whole point is that has to exist in core tier 1 instruction. That is not about intervention. That has to be for all kids. And I'm hoping that you're seeing that through this one example.
Just one follow-up question on the high school level, because you mentioned how some of the teachers were interested in learning more instructional techniques for how they can teach that tier 3 kind of vocabulary or the, you know, nuances or things like that. And how would this framework, can you just give some examples of how they would, you know, start going about that so we can do a better job with the vocabulary development, even at the high school level or even middle school, I guess.
So at the secondary level, I'll give you the example that actually we used during that session. The group was asked to put forward in order all the steps of how a bill becomes a law. And so, you know, you could present that to students, you can have them read about it, you can have them write about it. In this particular example, we used a strategy where there were the most important components of how a bill becomes a law and those steps. And we put the participants into groups. So there was opportunity to discuss, there was opportunity to access background knowledge. Some of the peers in the groups had more background knowledge of this. One person in the room had just become recently a US citizen. So she was like a ringer. And then we had pictorial cues for a group. So in a very similar way, you know, the strategies can be applied, but that's the point, because we don't want children, when that tier 3 vocabulary becomes more demanding, we don't want there to be a shutdown, right? We have to think about those, again, how do you access background knowledge? How do you build background knowledge so that there is enthusiasm when the work becomes more complex? And so there's especially a need to do this at the secondary level, because there's such a focus at the elementary level on language learning and literacy development that a lot of times that whole idea of reading to learn and then learning to read and reading to learn, right? That we need to make sure that we're sharing these strategies with our folks up in grade 6 through 12.
And I'll follow up on that, and this gets back to either visual learners or people who learn with like listening. At the high school level in particular, where the courses are much more complex and detailed, would we also be offering resources for high school students in order to potentially be able to, you know, listen to something like an audio book, or have more of a visual example available as an online resource, if that is how they can more effectively access material, as opposed to just a straight lecture where they're supposed to be writing in a notebook?
Yes, that's the point. And that's why it was so important. For example, you know, we had a DHS chemistry teacher in the room with us. So yeah, really spreading the knowledge of instructional strategies that support that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I think we've had a really enlightening and fun meeting this morning, so I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you for playing along.
Absolutely. We'll move on to public comment.
We have nobody in.
All right. May I have a motion to adjourn? All right. Thank you, everybody.